Welcome back to today's Explainer. So, I want you to picture your body for a second as this incredibly bustling, high-tech 24/7 factory, right? And like literally any massive industrial plant out there, just running the normal, everyday machinery of your cells generates a ton of dangerous, toxic byproducts. We're talking about stuff like urea and excess salts, which, leads us to a pretty vital question. What exactly happens to all that toxic waste your body is making every single second? Well, if we didn't have a dedicated biological cleanup crew constantly working behind the scenes, all those accumulated waste would quickly become incredibly harmful. They'd completely wreck our delicate internal balance in no time. Okay, let's dive into this. We're talking about the excretory system, or, the renal or urinary system. This whole setup is entirely responsible for removing those waste products. It produces, stores, and eliminates urine, all while maintaining this perfect homeostasis of water, salt, and pH levels. It is absolutely crucial for our survival. Actually, it's so vital that there's an entire branch of medicine called urology completely dedicated to studying these exact structures and the diseases that affect them.
So, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the body's cleanup crew. Second, we're going inside the master filter. Third, we'll check out the microscopic magic of the nephron. Fourth is transit, storage, and release. And finally, number 5, the final output.
All right, Section 1. The body's cleanup crew. The undisputed stars of the show here are, for sure, your kidneys. We're talking about a pair of bean-shaped, reddish-brown organs tucked securely right against your posterior abdominal wall. They sit roughly between your 12th thoracic and 3rd lumbar vertebrae. And here's a fun little fact. Your right kidney actually sits just a bit lower than the left one. Why? Just to make room for your liver. Now, despite being pretty small, they're only about 11 by 6 by 3 centimeters and weigh about 150 grams each, they are heavily armored. They've got 3 really crucial protective layers: a tough fibrous capsule to block infections, a thick layer of perirenal fat to absorb shocks, and the renal fascia, which basically anchors the whole shebang firmly in place.
Moving right along to Section 2, inside the master filter.
Let's trace how this high-tech facility is structured on the inside. Starting at the outer reddish-brown edge, we have the cortex. As we move a bit deeper inward, we hit the medulla. And you'll notice these very distinct triangular structures in there. Those are the renal pyramids, and they're separated by tissue extensions called renal columns. Now, freshly filtered fluid actually drips right from the tips of those pyramids, down into cup-shaped drains known as calyces. Those little drains then merge together into a much larger funnel-shaped cavity called the renal pelvis before the fluid finally exits out the hilum. The hilum is basically the main doorway where the ureter, blood vessels, and nerves all come and go. Okay, Section 3, microscopic magic, the nephron. Prepare yourselves because this number is absolutely mind-blowing. 1 million. Yep, each one of your kidneys contains roughly 1 million individual microscopic filtration units. They're called nephrons, and they are the true structural and functional heroes doing the real heavy lifting when it comes to making urine. Now, what's really interesting here is the convoluted, almost maze-like structure of the nephron itself. Imagine following a single drop of fluid through this pathway. Blood first arrives at the glomerulus. That's a tight little knot of capillaries tucked right inside a cup-like structure called Bowman's capsule. From there, our freshly filtered fluid travels through the proximal convoluted tubule, or PCT for short. Then it plunges way down into this long U-shaped drop called the loop of Henle, snakes its way back up through the distal convoluted tubule, the DC, and finally empties out into a shared collecting duct. It's like a giant biological water slide. So what is actually happening during that crazy winding journey? Well, it's basically a microscopic assembly line, and it operates in 3 very strict steps. Step 1 is glomerular filtration. This is where high pressure literally forces water, glucose, and salts out of the blood, but leaves the big stuff, like blood cells and proteins, safely behind. But wait, your body doesn't want to just toss out all that good stuff, right? So step 2 is tubular reabsorption. This system aggressively grabs back useful substances, glucose, sodium, water, and pumps them right back into your bloodstream. Finally, we have step 3, tubular secretion. This is where your body actively dumps leftover toxins, excess hydrogen ions, and potassium directly into the tubule fluid to create the final waste product.
Now, a super crucial point to understand is that this whole filtration system does way, way more than just make urine. It is fundamentally managing your entire internal environment. I mean, your kidneys actively regulate your blood pressure using the renin-angiotensin system. They perfectly balance your blood's delicate pH and electrolyte levels. They even act as a hormone factory. They produce erythropoietin, which tells your bones to make more red blood cells, and calcitriol, which is literally essential for activating vitamin D in your body. Pretty amazing, right?
Let's zoom back out for section 4, transit, storage, and release.
So once the urine is made, it travels down the ureters. These are two muscular tubes, about 25 to 30 centimeters long. And hey, there's a huge misconception out there that urine just sort of falls down these tubes thanks to gravity. Not true at all. The middle muscular layer of the ureter actually pumps the urine downward using rhythmic, wave-like contractions. We call that peristalsis. And since the volume of fluid can really vary, that innermost layer, the mucosa, is lined with a special transitional epithelium that easily stretches and flexes as the fluid passes by.
Which brings us to our next anatomical pit stop, the urinary bladder. Think of this as your body's temporary holding tank. It's a hollow, muscular, pear-shaped reservoir tucked safely away in the pelvic cavity. Now, inside this tank is a highly specific triangular area known as the trigone. It's formed by 3 openings, the 2 entry points from those ureters we just talked about, and the single exit point for the urethra. Clinically speaking, the trigone is a major hotspot, mostly because urinary tract infections very frequently take root right in that specific area.
So how do we actually know when it's time to empty the tank? Well, the bladder wall is super elastic. As it fills up, that transitional epithelium stretches out, and stretch receptors embedded right in the wall start firing signals directly to your brain. That's what gives you that very unmistakable sensation of needing to pee. And when it is finally time to go, a specialized smooth muscle layer called the detrusor muscle forcefully contracts to expel the urine out of the bladder.
And that brings us to section 5, the final output.
Now, the actual pathway out of the body looks quite different depending on your biology. If we compare the male and female urethra, there's a pretty significant anatomical difference. The male urethra is about 18 to 20 centimeters long. It actually serves a dual purpose, carrying both urine and semen, making it part of the reproductive system too. The female urethra, on the other hand, carries only urine and is much shorter, just about 3 to 4 centimeters long. And that's a really crucial distinction to remember, because that shorter length makes it so much easier for bacteria to travel up the canal. That is exactly why females face a significantly higher risk of getting urinary tract infections.
And here we have it, the final product. The average adult produces roughly 1 to 2 liters of urine every 24 hours. If we look at the composition, it is overwhelmingly water, about 96%. That remaining 4% is just densely packed with solutes and nitrogenous wastes, like urea and creatinine. This fluid is slightly acidic, hovering around a pH of 6, and it has a specific gravity, which is basically a measure of its concentration compared to water, between 1.001 and 1.035. Oh, and if you've ever wondered where that classic pale yellow color comes from, it's entirely due to a specific pigment called urochrome. Of course, because this whole system is so intricately balanced, things can occasionally go wrong. Sometimes salt deposits can crystallize into incredibly painful kidney stones. Severe damage might even lead to renal failure, where those master filters just stop working entirely. We might also see clinical warning signs in the urine itself, things like proteinuria, where protein slips into the urine, which usually signals glomerular damage, or hematuria, which means there's blood unexpectedly present. Really understanding these symptoms highlights just how immensely valuable it is to keep our biological water treatment plant healthy. We've traced this incredibly complex journey, right from a bustling, waste-producing factory all the way to a highly refined, perfectly balanced exit strategy. It truly is a marvel of microscopic engineering, and it's happening inside of you every single second. So I'll leave you with this thought. The next time you drink a simple glass of water, will you stop and think about the million microscopic filters tirelessly working to keep you alive right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, stay curious and keep learning.